It is Dude.
What is up, my fellow dude?
Tap. It is good to see you. Michael Parkhurst hanging out with the Friday Free Kick and our friends at Beyond Goals Mentoring. I've got a bunch of different questions, obviously, about soccer, but considering that's what the show is. But the first question I had today, and it's a question having to do with anniversaries. Today, and the boss, for those that follow her and me on the Facebooks, she posted that today is our 14th anniversary of our first date. And so we've been married. We just cleared 10. So we're 10 years, 2.5 months. So today is our first date anniversary 14 years ago. Do you, sir, this is the QOD, the question of the day. Do you remember your first date with the boss? Where you went, what you did? Do you remember your first date and when it was?
It's funny you asked that, John, because the quick answer is no.
Wow.
But my wife also likes to celebrate the anniversary of our dating. And so I do know the date is March 22nd, which we just passed. But and then honestly, I don't think she remembers because we were talking about it just the other day. I was like, do you remember where we went the first time? I was like, I don't know. Both in college, so it's probably like Wendy's or something.
Wow. So how long have the two of you been together with dating and marriage?
Marriage has been 15 years.
Mazel tov.
Yeah, dating 20.
Wow.
Goodness gracious, is that right?
Man, good work.
Yeah.
But yeah, today, like I said, the boss posted that on all of the social medias, and I was trying to ask everyone what their first dates were and what they remembered. So that was why I felt compelled to bring you into this conversation. So we can commiserate on all these kinds of things.
I hear you. It's funny. We struggle to remember our wedding date, both of them actually, because we got married in Aruba, a destination wedding, and we always forget if it's the 28th or the 29th of December. I think that it's just a blur. We were in an all-inclusive place with a lot of friends, and the whole time was a blur. A very good time, but a blur nonetheless. And so our actual wedding certificate date, is like sometime in October because we had to go get the certificate before we got married, and that was just procedurally, and so I don't even remember that date.
Well, for us, we kind of turned it into one of those mnemonic devices, 1, 12, 13. Because 1 plus 12 equals 13.
Nice.
And so we lucked out in that. So that's something that I can't forget. Otherwise, I'm in serious trouble when it comes to these kinds of things. And Alex Pacine, who's in the Twitch pitch, says that you need one of those live, laugh, love hokey signs with your relationship milestone date. That's how he and his wife roll.
Nice. Yeah, that would be helpful. Thankfully, though, we've been together long enough. My wife doesn't really expect me to remember or do anything. She gets herself flowers so that, she's beyond the point of expecting me to remember, and also, which is great. It's a win-win, right?
It's an absolution of remembering things, and it's like, oh, you forgot. No, I didn't forget. It was a universal forgetting.
I knew she was going to buy herself flowers, so I didn't need to do it.
Folks are saying that you cracked the code when it comes to anniversaries and remembering these kinds of things. Well done. Everyone is giving you the salam right now.
You have to go through many years of misery to get to that point, though. So,
Wow. All right. So since you used the M word, let's go ahead and talk soccer.
Massacre?
No, well, misery was what I was going to use the word misery. So let's go ahead and go there. But we are talking about that match in Columbus. By the way, were you there? Did you see what was going on?
I was there. Brought the kids with me. Yep. So saw it firsthand.
And Your initial thoughts about what happened there at the Death Star.
It was a debacle. Yeah, it was rough to see, and obviously I work a lot with Noah Cobb, and he was getting his first start. I'm sitting right next to his parents, or right, they're there. He made the trip up, and I felt terrible for him because I thought he actually had a decent game, all things considered. Especially in the first half. I thought he was pretty good. So I was just more disappointed for him, right? I mean, when you make your first start, you expect to have a lot of help around you, your center back partner, your outside backs, your D mids, right? A lot of help, and you got no help. I thought Parata was one of the worst players on the field. The midfielder was overrun. It was just, it was a disaster. So they beat us physically, tactically, all over the field. And so that was disappointing to see.
And the Gutman injury, obviously, late in the first half, caused trying to figure things out in that second half. But yeah, just everything just ends up going downhill in that second half from a relatively competitive first half. So the mentoring questions that I have for you. In something like this, when was the last time that you were part of a day like Atlanta and Columbus? Was it Houston?
Gosh, Houston that was a rough one. That was the first game of the season. And I didn't start that game. We were down, was it 4-0 at halftime?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. That was rough. Yeah, that might have been the last one. I can't remember. I've had my fair share of beatings, throughout my career where you take 4 or 5. I don't know if I've ever lost by 6. But those are tough because, it can crack a locker room, finger pointing, and that's a tough one. So from my perspective, it's one of those games that you put behind you and you don't focus too much on it. You understand that the effort and the physicality needs to be better, and the mindset, and then you move past it because you're not going to gain a lot from it. It's just there's too much there. So instead of analyzing it, I think you move forward from those as quickly as possible and focus on the next one.
Well, and then I mean, in a situation like that, I know that being a professional athlete, it's going to stick with you even though you don't want it to stick with you. How difficult or easy is it to sit there and just take a game and just go like this and just, put it in file 13? Does that take time to learn that mindset, or is it something that you just kind of sit there and immediately can flush? I mean, what's the learning process in putting something like that behind you?
Yeah, it's more difficult for sure for some guys than others. I think that some of it is, what position you play on the field, how personally responsible you felt. Probably for the defenders, it's going to be a little bit tougher to put behind you than the other guys. Noah probably one of the tougher ones just because it's your first game, and you take that and you think, what could I have done differently? And I'm not sure he could have done much differently on most of the goals. But that's a skill that you learn over time, right? Of how to let some things go, where to focus, what not to focus on, and that could be challenging for sure.
Is that a generational thing? Is it where folks who are, I guess, my age, who were born in the late 1780s, can process it and throw it away, or is it something that's more universal? Do younger generations discard those kinds of events better than older generations? Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z. Have you seen any kind of correlation one way or the other?
Yeah, I don't think it's generational because I think that even since I was a young pro, right, it was difficult sometimes to fall asleep after games. You're focusing on those couple little mistakes and they stay with you. And sometimes that leads to dips in confidence the next week, and you're thinking about some of those mistakes going into the next game of like, okay, let me learn from this. Don't make the same mistake. But then, it's kind of in the back of your head and these moments come up, especially like if you're giving up goals on crosses, right? And then like the ball goes wide in a game and you're thinking, okay, let me don't get beat again. Like, okay, let me think real quick about what I did last time, right? Where I need to be. And sometimes you start to overthink things rather than just going with, natural instincts. But that's, I think, generationally, I think that's just sports in general. Young, old, I think we all go through it. I mean, again, with the more experience, you learn how to deal with those things and how to put them away.
When it came to overthinking, was there a moment for you where it just kind of processed through and you stopped overthinking, or was it more of a process? It's like, okay, I've been through these kinds of things. I'm just going to not let things get to me. I'm just going to let things flow more naturally. Was there a moment where it just kind of clicked for you, or was it more of a gradual process?
Yeah, I think it took time. It took time to have the confidence of like, and I think early on in my career, it was like, especially the position I played, it just felt like I was letting the team down, right? When I made a mistake and they scored a goal, right? And if it cost us a game, right, it's my fault. Not just that we made a mistake, but that we lost the game or that we tied the game, right? And you start thinking, gosh, we travel all the way to the West Coast. We put in all this effort all week. We put in 90 minutes of running our, tails off. And
You could have used the other word, because I thought that was where you were going.
Running our tail off, and it's like, and I make a mistake and we lose the game.
Yeah.
And so those are the things that take time to learn how to deal with and recover from, and realize that, that one mistake wasn't the end all be all in the game. It was, a mistake, but there were plenty others made. And teammates, usually have your back. Right. And, I think that once I had more success throughout my career, you understand that, guys overlook those things, right? They're not pointing fingers. They understand like mistakes happen and you move on from them faster.
When it comes to lifting up friends, teammates, those kinds of folks in your orbit, obviously having that kind of camaraderie, that kind of family, that kind of friendship is key to this whole process. And when it comes to those kinds of individuals, I know that then there are some times where you might have a teammate who means well. It's like you're saying something and I know you mean well. Might take a little while for me to process what you're trying to say because I'm taking it too personally. How do you not get revved up in that notion of, it's like, I know I made a mistake. It's great that you want to tell me these kinds of things. Don't tell it to me right now. Kind of tell it to me later. Did you have anybody around you in your orbit when you were playing who's like, yeah, I know, just kind of don't talk to me right now. Talk to me later, so it doesn't sound like it's coming out funny?
Yeah, I think that was one of my skills of being able to read those situations. But I think that's also where like leave it on the field, that saying comes in, because when you're out there on the field, you've got a lot of emotions, you got adrenaline pumping, right? And sometimes you don't think clearly, right? And so if a teammate gets on you about something and you just don't want to hear it, right? Sometimes the reaction's not great, and you might be MFing a teammate, and it's not that you hate them and you want to fight them or anything, right? But you've got emotions and you just need to get that stuff out. And so that's why we say, hey, stuff stays on the field. Don't bring it into the locker room, because, leave the emotions out there, and that's less controlled, right? Versus like, okay, now we're in the locker room. Now we're friends again. I've caught my cool. And I think that, guys, and again, that's another thing that takes time, right? Sometimes, guys are more emotional, can bring that into the locker room. And that's when you get confrontations and, things that can hurt a locker room, versus, understanding, hey, they were on the field, like just leave it there. Don't let it boil over type stuff. Because it can be tough to try and take criticism or even advice in if you're not in a mental space to take it. Right. And, that happens a lot.
Yeah, it almost sounds like that at times. It's almost like giving advice or being a mentor. It's almost like a defensive driving course at times, where you have to think for yourself and for everyone else that you could be impacting with your advice. You've got to figure out, okay, I can say this at this point. I can say this at this point. I know that this person can handle this kind of information this way. This person handles it this way. It almost sounds like mentoring is almost like defensive driving at some points.
Yeah, totally. And we tell the players sometimes that the best way to support a teammate sometimes when they've done that is just through actions and non-actions, right? Of like body language stuff. When a teammate makes a mistake, they know you've got your support or not based off of your body language and your reaction to their mistake, right? They have to own their reaction, but you can help with your reaction, right? A teammate makes a mistake, and do you throw your hands up in the air, or do you work your tail off to go get the ball back and tackle somebody? That stuff alone right there is a way of communicating without actually using your voice. And a lot of times within games and sometimes training, that is the best way to communicate, rather than, hey, you should have done this, or look for me right here. Those types of things that can be said afterwards. In the moment, the action is greater.
Yeah, it's verbal versus nonverbal communication, I guess, is probably the best way to talk about it. Where folks, if you don't want to hear it, the guy next to you can show you in different ways that can be just as impactful, and that way you can process the information in a different way instead of being told when you may not want to hear it.
Totally. And like with everything, there's those fine lines, right? There's definitely times when guys make mistake, and especially if it's not the first time they've made that mistake, that they get laid into, and it needs to happen sometimes, of like, hey, this isn't good enough. There's an expectation to be better, and get your head out of the sand and help us out here. And that happens sometimes, right? That's holding guys responsible, and that's a little bit of leadership, and it's up to those guys to handle it the proper way, which doesn't always happen. But I'm not saying verbalizing things is never the way, because sometimes it needs to be done.
Well, and it's the level that it comes out when it comes to verbalizing, because some folks, I've never thought of you as someone who raises their voice in a situation unless it gets to that point of no return where you feel like you have no other option as a leader. Then that's the way you're going to do things. There are those, and I've always thought of you in this genre, basically, where you're going to be level-headed. You're going to show things in different ways. It's going to be verbal or nonverbal, but you're not going to sit there and turn the hairdryer on unless it is the absolute last option that you can think of in a situation like that. Am I off here?
No. That's just my personality, and trying to be a little bit more level-headed. And there's plenty of guys within every locker room that, like to talk, and, we'll get on guys and be vocal and stuff. And so for me, it was, I don't need to add on to that sometimes. And then, I think guys respected the fact when I was blowing up and I was really yelling at a guy, that it was deserved, and like they were going to pay attention, because it wasn't that often. And so when I did it, I think it came across a little bit more sincere and a little bit stronger than a guy that's constantly doing it, right? You shut that guy out eventually, because you're like, oh, here's this guy just complaining again.
And I'm sitting here and I'm having this picture in my mind of you turning the hairdryer on, and I imagine that the impact is that much more, because, as you say, it's not your MO. And when you get to that point of no return, folks are either going to listen, or, and it can go one of two ways. If someone is genuine and wants to improve and wants to continue to help the team move forward, they will listen, because you've raised your voice to a level that folks aren't used to hearing. Or, that individual may just sit there and go, yeah, he's just blowing off steam, and, I'm going to do whatever. But do you remember the last time as a player that you did have one of those moments where you lit into either a room or a group of individuals in front of everybody, and the impact that it had at the time?
I'm trying to remember. I remember two. One was a little bit smaller, and I laid into Barco one time during, I think it was halftime, because he was complaining I think I had made a mistake that cost us a goal or a chance or something. And, he's complaining in Spanish and stuff. And I laid into him and made sure Leandro translated for him because I wanted to make sure he got what I was saying. And I did that in front of the whole group just to let him know that, don't get on somebody for making a mistake, right? It's that's kind of crazy, especially a young player to a veteran player. But I do specifically remember one time in Denmark, we were playing in Champions League, and I don't know if you've ever seen this, John, but we played against Shakhtar Donetsk in the group stage. We were playing a home game in Copenhagen, and they scored a goal on the ball had gone out of bounds because someone was injured. They were supposed to kick the ball back to us because we had kicked the ball out. So their guy kicked the ball back to us. Their striker ran onto the ball, circled our goalie, and scored. Oh. While all of us were kind of like standing there like, what are you doing? You kicked the ball back to us. Yeah. And so I laid into our team after the game. We went on to lose that game 5-3. And that guy scored a hat trick. That was his first goal of the game, and he scored a hat trick. And I thought that he should have left that game injured. And I know that there's this whole fair play thing, but like we did not put fear into him or do anything. And I thought, at that moment, like you need to play the best game of your life and really show up and really do things differently, because the disrespect that we were shown from that team, from UEFA, from the referees, like nothing was done about it. And, we let this guy score a hat trick, and I absolutely laid into the team afterwards. Like I've never have before, just letting them know, like, this performance is just unacceptable. It's embarrassing. We should all be embarrassed. I don't care. We're such a smaller team than Shakhtar. You just can't let that happen. And that was in front of the coaches, in front of the players, everything. And I wasn't the captain.
Well, then what was the response? Not necessarily in the locker room after the fact, but what was the response in the overall where this guy who's not the captain and an American, and I'm sure that there was probably some bias in there to nationality too. What was the response when you stood up and was like, this guy should have been, absolutely blown up for what he did, and your team didn't do it, and you acted that way? What was the response after that?
I had been there a couple of years, so they all knew me and respected me. And I think that, like I said, that wasn't me normally. So I think that everyone kind of took it like, wow, maybe we did mess up here, and hopefully learn from it a little bit. I was playing outside back at the time, so I wish I had more of an opportunity to take care of it myself in the game. So I think the response was good. Guys, I think, respected me a little bit more, for coming out and saying what I felt, and I wasn't wrong. And guys knew that.
All right. So from a team that drove you crazy in Champions League to a team that I'm sure drove you crazy here in Major League Soccer, Red Bulls. They are coming to Mercedes-Benz this weekend. When I mention the New York Red Bulls who play in Harrison, New Jersey, what comes to mind?
A dogfight. You have just nonstop, constant pressure. Just like a style of play that is just so different than most of the teams that I played on. Not a style that I particularly like or enjoy, but I do respect the work that they put in and what they do and how committed they are to how they play. But I don't really care for the Red Bulls at all. Their stadium's beautiful. Their fans are terrible. It's just, I got nothing for Red Bull. And I've liked a bunch of the players, like when they were really good, like, Wright Phillips and Sasa Kleshin and Dax McCarty, like good people, Luis in goal. But the team itself, no thanks.
So when you're in a situation like this, and let me take it into the mentoring aspect of all of this, when you're going up against a team that plays a certain way that you're not playing against every single day. How do you? I imagine that discipline comes up big in situations like this, because it's like, preparing to go up against the spread as a defense, and then all of a sudden you've got a team that runs the triple option or the veer, and you're having to basically almost turn it into assignment football when it comes to what you're supposed to do up against this group. When it comes to dealing with mentees and a situation that they're unfamiliar with, or that they really have to adjust to when it comes to style of play and approach and discipline, how do you have them flip that switch when it comes to being disciplined against a team like Red Bulls, the way they drive you crazy?
Yeah, I think for me, it's knowing it's okay to play different sometimes, right? To do what you have to do to win a game, and not think like you have to stay 100% committed to normal. And I think that's where maybe Atlanta United's made some mistakes against the Red Bull, and with Columbus, we did this as well, right? We love to play out of the back, and we do it against the Red Bull sometimes, right? But sometimes we couldn't. And the benefit to how they play is them doing their press once out of 10 times very good leads to a massive chance, if not a goal.
Right.
Where if Atlanta United breaks the press 9 times, it might lead to one chance. It doesn't necessarily, because you still have to break their other lines and create the chance and whatever. So it's a risk reward thing. So sometimes it's a balance between staying committed to how you play versus, okay, take away their strength, and how do you do that? So I think when I talked to Noah about playing the Red Bulls when he was as an academy player,
right.
Told him, hey, don't be afraid to play longer in this game specifically, right? It's okay, right? Don't let them play to their strength of continually press, right? Sometimes push the line up, kick the goal kick long, right? Take away what they do best. So we'll see if that's how Atlanta United approaches it. Doesn't seem like they're going to do that. It seems like they're going to stick to their guns and play out and work through it. And so hopefully it works out. It just hasn't in the past for Atlanta United. I think the only win we've gotten against them was the home game in
right.
2018. And they sat back in that game for some reason. Right. I remember everybody was killing Chris Armas for the tactics of that game. They sat back, and so I don't know. If I was a coach, I'd be saying, let's not play out of it. Let's, GG up top wants to run all day, so get the ball in behind and let them go.
And sit there and have it almost have GG go up top and sit there and have Red Bulls work their way from the back as well. And so not giving them the chance to have that short field and figure out, okay, GG wants it. All right. Feed the man, feed the tank, and we'll see what happens. That's what you're hunting for in this one. If you were on the touchline.
Yeah, totally. And it's crazy when you're playing games like this, you have to study a little bit, because there's certain little aspects that you don't even think of in a game. Right. And like one is a center back passing to another center back, especially if they're really spread apart. Like the Red Bulls, they like to jump that with their outside winger, right? He'll come and press the center back really hard. So sometimes you can really, put your other center back partner in a bad spot if you don't look at that first, right? They egg you into that pass, and then they press that guy, and then he's coming at you hard, and so then you're tending to just play back to your goalie, and that just sets up their press even more. Against the Red Bulls, it's really important to play forward whenever you can, because that playing sideways or backwards just initiates more press from them.
All right. So where are you going to be watching this match, sir?
I'll be at my house. Yeah. Just hanging. Nothing going on this weekend, which is nice. We're coming off spring break right now. So last day of spring break, I guess, and then the weekend. So hanging at the house for this one.
All right. Well, then one question more before you go. How is Executive Michael Parkhurst and things going with Rhode Island FC? So hang on. Let me take down my advertisement here so I can show folks once again.
There it is.
Right there. There it is. What's the update now that you've got Kano as your head coach? And I still need to get Kano for an interview. Talk about
You're
There's
right.
Rhode Island FC right there. What's the latest?
Kano's down at GA Cup this weekend, a big tournament down in IMG. All the MLS Next teams, U15, U17 are down there. Atlanta United as well. So one of the biggest tournaments of the year. So he's down there scouting. as we continue to put together a technical staff and outlay budgets and all that stuff. So a lot of stuff that I've never done before and learning on the fly.
At MF Parkhurst, at BG Mentoring. Cap, it's always great to catch up with you, my friend, whether it's about being an executive in a burgeoning business or about how much Red Bulls drive you crazy. Cap, it's always great. We'll catch up with you in a couple of weeks.
Likewise, John. Have a great weekend. And Ricky Ricardo, I like the season pass. It's great. I really enjoy it, actually.
Yep, and I'm a 360 guy. I'm literally turning into a 360 guy. The more that they go to the announcers, the less studio and the more announcers on site, the better off they are. They've learned that, and that's very, very cool. Get out of here. Just go. We'll see you in a couple weeks.
See you.